Hi everyone, let us start with this trivia question. Who was the first person to leave Mass early after receiving the Eucharist? This episode of the Canon answers this question and more. For those of you who don't know, the first person in history to leave straight after receiving Holy Communion was Judas at the Last Supper. Definitely not someone we would want to emulate. This behavior is something most, if not all of us, have witnessed. It seems to be part and parcel at virtually all Catholic parishes we've been to. Catholics attend Mass, receive our Lord in the Eucharist, and walk straight out the door. We need to stop doing this immediately. The Mass is the source and summit of the Christian life. It is a representation of the one holy sacrifice of our Lord Jesus Christ. Mass is the most important thing we do every week. How can we disrespect our Lord like this? The sacrifice of the Mass is one seamless prayer. All the parts are inseparable, and attending Mass means attending from beginning to end. The code of the canon law reads, on Sundays and other holy days of obligation, the faithful are bound to participate in the Mass. It doesn't say part or parts of the Mass. The Catholic Catechism quotes the canon and states, those who deliberately fail in this obligation commit a grave sin. Just as there can be excuses for missing Mass, there could be excuses for coming late or leaving early or missing part of the celebration. A parent may have to go outside with a crying baby. A person may feel ill or need to go to the bathroom. These are acceptable reasons. Sneaking out for a cigarette or because of boredom, however, is not acceptable. An emergency may be the cause for a person to leave before the end of Mass. But if this happens before the consecration and communion, one can hardly be said to have attended Mass. But the emergency may excuse that person from further effort to go to Mass. What if I have a really good reason to leave early? Maybe an emergency just came up. But that's not why the vast majority of Catholics who leave Mass early are doing it. They are leaving early because it's become a habit. They get the Eucharist and want to beat the traffic if they leave early. They've either never been corrected or told otherwise, so why would they stop? Or they know but don't care at all. It is also very important to be at the Mass for the final blessing. When a priest standing in persona Christi, in the person of Christ, gives his final blessing, we are being blessed by God Himself. If Jesus was standing ready to give us a blessing before we left Mass and went back out into the world, wouldn't you wait for it? This kind of spiritual mediocrity can't be tolerated. Attending Mass is a direct instruction from God when He tells us to keep the Sabbath holy, and this instruction continues through the teachings of Christ's bride, the Church. If you want to be Catholic, attending Mass on Sundays, holy days of obligation, and actually as often as you can is mandatory. This means if you aren't willing to do this and stay until the end of Mass, then you simply aren't being an authentic Catholic. This needs to be remedied by going to confession. The questions are often brought up. If a person is late for Mass, can they still receive Holy Communion? If so, does it matter whether they were late through negligence or through no fault of their own? How late can they be and still receive communion? How late can they be and still fulfill their Sunday obligation? What about someone who arrives late out of no fault of their own. Should they receive Holy Communion? Mass is a whole, and we must first recognize Jesus in the Word before we recognize Him in the Eucharist. Therefore, it rests with the person arriving late to examine their conscience. Is the reason neglect or laziness? Or were the circumstances totally out of their control? If the former, then they would need to attend another full Mass. Even those who arrive late through no fault of their own should try to attend a full Mass. There are other things to consider besides the reason for lateness. If one arrives after the consecration, he or she has not attended Mass, no matter what the reason for their lateness. This person should not receive communion, and if it is a Sunday, has the obligation to attend another Mass. After all is said and done, the rules found within the canon and general instructions of our Church are there to enable us to live sacramentally full lives. Ticking the box and fulfilling the Sunday obligation reduces the sacrifice of the Mass to a disciplinary ritual. We were created for more, and God expects a deeper love response from His faithful. He knows what we need and what is best for us. Let us remember that we receive our Lord body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. There is nothing that is more worthy of our deep respect and love than that. And remember, fight the good fight and keep the faith.